Hey there, everybody. Franklin Taggart here. It is time for another virtual coffee break. I've got my coffee. Grab your beverage and let's chat for just a minute, shall we? Several weeks ago, I did a little bit of a video on how I believe that our work is a really central source for spiritual development. And I wanted to take that idea just a little bit further. In particular, I wanted to talk about solopreneurs, entrepreneurs. My favorite term that I've coined in the last year is solitude. Solitude workers. A solitude worker is someone who values solitude as much as they enjoy, making money at what they do and being paid for what they love. But a lot of the folks that I've worked with are people that I would call solitude workers. And I wanted to talk a little bit about some practical ways that I find that solopreneurship and solitude work lends itself to spiritual development. And that's not to say that other kinds of work don't. I'm just saying that this is where my experience comes from, and I can speak to this from experience rather than from theory. The thing that I think is at the top of my list for the spiritual development that happens as a solopreneur is that I learn my own limitations. I can have grandiose thoughts, I can have grandiose ideas, and I can have all kinds of, really amazing, just kinds of plans and schemes as to how I can show up in the world. And the truth is that most of the time, those things stretch my capabilities to the point that I can't exceed them anymore. And finding those limits is a place that I think is really important from a spiritual development perspective, because it helps us to form a very natural humility that is not it's not pretense and it's not fake. It is just a legitimate understanding of, wow, I just reached the end of what I could do, and I can't go beyond that. And I either have to reach out for help, or I have to retailor what I'm doing, or I have to, do something else. But very often, just finding those limits is a really amazing reminder that that I am not an infinite being. I'm a transient being in this journey here on Earth, and realizing that it puts me in my place. Now, that's not to say that I'm not going to have more grandiose ideas, because my mind is a fertile nesting ground for grandiose ideas. And what's really funny is that out of the grandiose ideas, very often, one of the things that can come from those is a different way of thinking or perceiving. And that, to me, is another form of spiritual development, is shifting our consciousness to accept realities that are different or bigger or stranger than the ones that we've grown accustomed to, and that our consciousness can be informed by perceiving things differently. That's another form of spiritual development that comes from my experience of entrepreneurship. It's like frequently I am put in a place where I have to find a different side to look at something from in order for it to either make sense, or for me to see a way to work with it, or for me to understand what needs to happen. Very often I have to shift my perspective. I have to expand my consciousness to see life differently than I did before in order to, navigate a new set of circumstances. So consciousness expanding is something that happens naturally through this entrepreneurship experience, because we have to think differently than people have thought before about problems that we have in order to solve them. The Einstein quote everybody is so fond of, that we can't solve a problem with the same level of thinking that the problem was created in. Well, that is a shift in consciousness. That is spiritual development. Another thing that I have found that I would consider spiritual development through entrepreneurship is that it requires deeper and deeper levels of trust and surrender than almost anything else that I've ever been through. I think probably the only things that I've ever been through that were harder to trust and surrender were when relationships ended, or when I had to face the impending death of a loved one, when we found out that our daughter wasn't going to live. I had to reach a level of trust and surrender in that process that I had never been challenged with before. And what I'll say is that entrepreneurship has put me into situations where the level of trust and surrender that I have is greater and is more intense and is more necessary than at any other time in my life. And some of the ways that I can see that more specifically are, sometimes my cash flow is low, and I have to believe that I'm still on the right track, even though I'm not seeing an immediate payoff. I still have to believe that I'm on the right track. I have to trust and surrender my state of things, knowing that there will be a return sometime in the future. And so there's a level of faith that has to happen in that entrepreneurship experience in order to just get through times like that, where there's uncertainty and unpredictability. There are also times when you reach an end of one phase of what you're doing. And I've seen this a lot with the artists and musicians and authors that I've worked with, where you reach a natural end to what you've been doing for a long period of time. And in that time period, there's just this sense of, well, what do I do now? And there isn't an easy answer that's available in that moment. It is something that has to be worked through and waited upon. And that does require a level of trust and surrender that is, different than in other places and times in our life. Now, again, I've talked about that my theology is very nebulous. I can't hang my hat or coat on a nail and say that I am one thing over all others. And a big reason for that is because everything that I've ever been through in terms of faith that was belief-based has been challenged and deconstructed over and over and over again. And the place that I've come to is this place of what I call real faith, which means that I am just here and I am open to truth as it presents itself. And I trust that I'm going to know what I need to know in the moment that the presentation is made. And that's going to have to be the extent of it. I can't go with any of the propositional religious statements and say, I can hang my hat there right now. But that's not to say that I can't be a faithful human. Faithful to what? I don't know. And honestly, I don't know that I care. But just the experience of trust and surrender is faith. It's laying my ideas, my life, everything that I know in front of whatever is there and saying, I don't know what to do right now. And I'm waiting for inspiration, and I'm waiting for guidance, and I'm waiting for whatever kind of impulse that needs to arise within me that's going to direct me to my next step. And that is the spiritual development that I've experienced through my entrepreneurship experiences. So I'm not going to say that it's the only way, but it is a way that I have found that people who don't have the patience to meditate a lot or to do a lot of pilgrimages to weird places around the world and to climb Himalayan mountains to find their gurus, there may be a way that's accessible to you that's just in the form of saying, I want to try doing things the way that I feel is right for me. And let that be your starting place. So, spiritual development through entrepreneurship, yes, I believe that it is a fertile ground for those kinds of things. If you have any questions about it, feel free to reach out. bit.ly/bestnextstepcall.com. Or no, there's not a .com on the end. It's just bit.ly/bestnextstepcall. Again, I don't want to hear from any missionaries. I don't want to hear from any evangelists. I've heard it all before. I've studied the Bible for years and years and years. I've learned Scripture over and over and over and over and over again. I've been there and I've done that, and I just don't want to hear from you if you want to preach to me. So that said, if you are interested in talking about spiritual development through entrepreneurship, I think we should have a conversation. bit.ly/bestnextstepcall. Thanks as always for your time and your attention, and I'll be back again tomorrow with another coffee break. So long.